To my religious stalker. First thing you should know is that I was blessed or cursed with young-looking genes. Everyone always thinks I'm younger than what I actually am. This bizarre event happened a few months after I turned 18. Bear in mind that I looked like I was 16. I lived in a large, very diverse city. I am Latina. It matters later on. And I grew up going to a church that belonged to a larger organization. So the church has a lot of location internationally and like 5 within this city. I went to this church since I was born, so I know most of the congregation. There were very few people that I didn't know, but there was one man, let's call him Nate, that always made me feel so uneasy and sick. The church has a routine of creating a line after service ends, so we can all greet each other. I hated having to greet him. I told my mom how I had a bad feeling about him. She said it was all in my head. Fast forward to a few months later, I was sitting in a dining area with my friend's boyfriend. We were just chatting and joking around waiting for her. Nate was sitting about 2 tables away from us. There was no one else, just us 3. He just sat there staring at us. I briefly mentioned to my friend's boyfriend how Nate always made me feel uneasy. I got so irritated cause I could feel him staring, so I went to the restroom. When I came back, Nate was sitting across from my friend's boyfriend talking. It was a little odd, but as I approached, so did a group of our friends. Now it was about 8 of us, ranging from the ages of 16 to 22. We all grew up together and met in youth group, sitting with a man in his late 40s. He sat in complete silence with us, just staring at me every now and then. About 5 minutes later, my friend's boyfriend said, "Oh, we have a youth meeting we need to get to." We all got up and left Nate sitting alone. When we got to the meeting place in another part of the building, my friend's boyfriend pulled her and myself apart and said, "Maybe I'm biased because of what you told me, but when you left to use the restroom, he came over and started asking about you. He even asked if I was your boyfriend. He looked a little mad, but seemed to lighten up when I said I wasn't." The crazy part is that at that moment, my friend told us that when Nate first started coming to our church, he messaged her on Facebook. He kept sending her messages that he was lonely and just wanted to be friends. And coincidentally, that's when she started dating her boyfriend, so she changed her relationship status and the messages stopped. At the time, I was taking a social media hiatus cause my ex didn't handle our breakup well, so he was harassing me on socials. After my friend told me about the messages, I decided to log in into my Facebook, and indeed, there was hundreds of messages from him. He actually didn't use his real name on his account, which should have been a red flag. The messages would start nice enough about being friends and would get verbally aggressive cause I was ignoring him or cause he saw me talking to any of my guy friends at church. I made the mistake of just blocking him and deleting the message thread. Big mistake. Always keep the evidence. I brought it up to my parents and they again blew me off. Said it was just a culture thing cause Nate was from El Salvador and apparently it's common to be overly affectionate with strangers in most Latin American countries. Anyways, a few weeks later, my parents did a 180. When Nate first started coming to church, he sat all the way in the front row, and me being a teenager, sat all the way in the back row with my friends. Slowly over the last few months, Nate would start sitting one bench further back until finally, he was sitting on the same bench as my friends and I. I don't know about y'all, but in my church, women have to wear skirts or dresses during the service. We have church on Saturdays, and there is a morning and afternoon service, and in between, they have mini services and workshops for different age groups and genders. This particular Saturday, I wore a knee-length dress and had a couple of friends sit between Nate and me. I was just whispering with my friends during the afternoon service, and normally when it ends, everyone kind of hangs out and socializes. During this time, my dad was working the night shift at a hospital, so he would have to leave before the afternoon service ended. But my mom would still like to socialize afterward. Yet, this Saturday, my mom herded our family to the car ASAP. My friend, who had received the messages too, was actually sleeping over, and my dad had asked us to buy a couple of pizzas and meet him in the cafeteria of the hospital, which wasn't too far from the church, and it was empty cause we got there at 8:30. We all ate, talked and joked around until my dad asked my grandmother to take my younger brothers outside to play giant chess just outside the cafeteria. Once they left, my dad apologized to me for never believing me. I was completely surprised because I had no idea what he was talking about. He went on to tell me that my mom had happened to look back cause my parents sat on the bench in front of us and saw the way Nate had been looking at me hungrily during the AM service at church. She asked my dad to speak to him during break time. My dad has never wanted to go into much detail about what was spoken except to tell me the following. Dad, my wife and I have some concern over your interest in our daughter. Nate, let me stop you there. Your daughter and I are in a beautiful committed relationship. It's God's will for us to be together. You should try to stop God's will. Dad, what is wrong with you? She's still just a kid. If you were really looking for an actual relationship, you would be pursuing one of the older single women in this church. You are sick. Hearing my dad confirm what I suspected and validating my gut feeling made me break down in tears. The whole situation frightened me because I knew he wasn't just trying to sit on my bench, he was working his way to me, to sit next to me, to talk to me, and worse, to touch me. My dad proceeded to tell me that he talked with the group of pastors at our church about what Nate had been doing then. One of the pastors yelled out, "Are we seriously going to let him do this again?" Turns out, I wasn't the first. My friend wasn't the first. There was someone else. I didn't know who, but I was set on finding out more. I called around and let people know from the other churches in our organization to keep an eye out in case he had or tried to have inappropriate social media or in-person encounters with any other minors. My investigation paid off as I found 3 other girls, 13, 15, and 16 years old, and they were all from different churches and one was from mine. They all had the same story. He tried social media contact and eventually tried in-person contact. The 13-year-old has an older sister who handled him, and a few weeks later, he moved on to another church. The 16-year-old went to a church that was pretty much made up of literally her entire extended family. Almost everyone was related. Apparently, a couple of her older cousins caught him doing or saying something incredibly inappropriate to her, at church of all places, and it's unclear if they threatened violence or beat him up, but I do know that the police was involved only because of the cousins, not because of what was happening with the minor. This brings me back to the 15-year-old girl that went to church with me. He did his whole routine with her, but it went to the point that he got her number and was texting and calling her at all hours. Her brother stepped in and asked him to stop and apologized if his sister let him on. He genuinely blamed his sister for what happened. I remember being filled with so much rage. Turns out Nate was being prepared to be a pastor at my church, and even though my dad complained about his behavior, they were still going to go ahead with it. I told my dad after I stopped crying that I wanted to talk to a lawyer ASAP. Well, my dad had a friend that was an immigration lawyer and she offered to help connect us with someone that could help us. The lawyer said because he never actually threatened me or tried to physically hurt me, I didn't have any grounds for a restraining order. I don't know if that's in all the states or just in Texas. My dad informed the pastors prior to our meeting with the lawyer that we were seeking legal counsel to see what my options were for dealing with Nate. Thus, unfortunately, led to the spread of false corrupted information because by the next Saturday, everyone who wasn't directly informed by my family believed that I was trying to sue the church. These were mostly people that knew me my whole life, people I loved. They called me a gold digger, said it was my fault for dressing provocatively and that I probably led him on. Keep in mind that I didn't wear V-necks, made sure my dresses were at least knee-length, and if my shoulders were exposed, I wore a cardigan unless it was very hot out. It broke my heart, especially cause one of my favorite uncles, the only one that also goes to church, actually sided with them. To this day, I only politely greet him and I don't hate him, but my love for him is gone. This decision to not have my back affected his relationship with everyone in our family, including his own kids. I took a few weeks and stopped going to church. Nate just stopped showing up at church. He stopped trying to message me from his fake accounts. He just disappeared. Things got so hostile that the president of the church organization administration had to step in and hold a hearing for everyone's complaints. It was decided that it would be best if my dad stopped attending church because he was a troublemaker, even though all he was doing was standing up for me, asking for respect and accountability. It was announced a week later that my dad would no longer be welcomed at that church. My dad took a few moments to say goodbye in front of everyone and said that we talked as a family and none of us would be coming back. He said he was choosing to leave, remembering all the good times and the life lessons he learned in his 20 years of attending that church. He asked them to learn from their mistakes and be better. Everyone started crying, including all the people that called us gold diggers and called me a slut to my face. I remember this one older lady that was best friends with my grandma saying that she and her husband really loved me, but I had stopped loving them, and that's why our relationship was so strained. Nope, lady, it's the fact that you called me a slut even though you were one of the people that would change my diaper. I apologize for the long post, but I still get so angry when I think about everything that happened, how it all escalated. I also get mad at myself and the system because I know Nate is still out there. Because even though he lost interest in me, it doesn't change the fact that he will always be targeting underage girls. Sometimes I can't help but worry because I know eventually talking and looking won't be enough for him. He's the reason I signed up for self-defense classes, attend kickboxing classes religiously, carry a pepper spray and taser, got a license to carry, why my dad secured our home like Fort Knox. He is the reason why my mom and grandma each take turns double-checking all the windows and doors are locked before going to bed. I know monsters are real. He is the reason why I stopped going to church. Because until he happened, church was my sanctuary, where I felt safest, but he took that from me. To Nate, you know who you are, you monster. I hope we never meet again, because if we do, I will be your worst nightmare. Always trust your gut, even when you're told it's all in your head.